Hey, we are back and still going with Genesis, first book of the Bible. We are in chapter 17. We're going to cover the entire chapter, and that's verses 1 through 27. This one starts off with Abram at 99 years old. He is 99 years old. And at this point, his wife is about 10 years younger than him, give or take a couple months. So we want to keep track of their ages because there's going to be a conversation in here where he discusses their ages and what God is promising him. So in chapter 17, we're going to see God renew his covenant with Abram and give him a little bit more to the puzzle. Remember, God will tell you to go and you just got to start moving. He doesn't give you all the pieces. He doesn't give you the entire plan. Sometimes he just says, here's what the end is going to be. Go for it. And along the way, he'll give you the rest of the pieces. So we're seeing one more piece of the puzzle kind of falling into place here. And so it starts off with Abram being 99 years old when God appeared to him. It says, I am the Almighty God. I am God. Walk before me and be perfect. Like, I'm God. I want you to keep moving. I want you to go. But I want you to do this thing the way I'm telling you to do it. Don't do it the way you think. Don't get lazy. Don't fall off. And God says, and I will make a covenant between me and thee. I'm reading from the King James Version because we're going to make this understandable. It's not that tricky if we take it, a little bit at a time. And I will multiply thee exceedingly. I'm going to make you numerous. When you multiply a person, that means you have babies. And there's going to be so many descendants. So God is again telling him, I'm going to keep this covenant between you. I know that it's been a long time that you've been waiting. I know that it's a lot going on. I know that it might have gotten hard to believe. I know you tried to do some things with Hagar and, with Ishmael, and there's this whole thing that's happening. But I want you to know that I have not forgotten the promise that I made you. And as long as you continue to do what I tell you to do and do this thing the way I tell you to do it, this is going to work out. So let's just keep going. You keep moving the way I tell you to move. And Abraham falls on his face. That means he bows down and says to God, and then God says to him, with my covenant is going to make you a father of nations. This is not just one baby that I'm promising you. I'm promising you nations. I'm promising you descendants. Remember, as numerous as the stars in the sky, as numerous as the dust on the ground. And so in verse 5, it says, neither shall thy name anymore be called Abram. He said, don't call yourself that anymore. I'm changing your name. Your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you the father of many nations. Abraham means father of many nations, whereas Abram before meant exalted father. So he was going to be a good dad before, but now he is the father of nations. God has taken the thing that he was thinking was going to happen and multiplied it beyond what he was expecting. He still does not have this kid that God has promised him. He has the kid with Hagar, and he is going to talk to God about that because he wants to kind of understand how this is supposed to work. Because right now he's got a little hectic situation at home. And in verse 7, it says, I'll establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee. What he's saying is, I am establishing my covenant, my promise. I'm going to stamp this. I'm going to seal it. It's going to be permanent. And it's not just between the two of us. It's between me, you, and everything that comes through your line, your entire legacy after you. And this land that you're a stranger in, remember God promised him that everywhere his feet stepped was going to be land that was his, that was going to support this nation of people that was going to come from him. And he's saying this land of Canaan is an everlasting possession. I will be the God of your children. And they're going to have this land that I promised them. And there's going to be so many of them, they're going to call you nations. You are the father of nations. We sing in like Vacation Bible School and stuff when I was a kid, Father Abraham had many sons. These many sons are the nations, the people that have come from this. And so in verse 10, at the bottom of it, God says, every man child among you shall be circumcised. Shall means do it. Shall is a command, it's a promise, it's permanent. Shall is not a question, it is, you got to do it. It is You are not being, oh, could you? It's not a strong suggestion. It is a do it. It is a command. And so he says every male child should be circumcised. And it goes into the next couple of verses who should be circumcised and when. So because this command is coming right now, this covenant is being made right now, everybody who is past the time where it's supposed to happen needs to have it happen now. The circumcision is for every male in your house. So that's slave, free, your sons, people who are in your home, the people that work for you. This is a covenant. Anybody who wants to fall under this covenant, this is the mark that you give. And a circumcision is really just trimming the foreskin around the penis for males. But he says at 8 days old, you should do this. And this is a very common practice in most countries, most cultures. As there's a time where baby boys are circumcised. Medically, it is perfectly fine. There's not a thing that goes against it. Traditionally, it's kind of up to the parents at this point. There are some religions or cultures that it is, part of, and there's a ceremony that goes along with it. But for this point, God is saying, I want you to bring everybody in. I want you to mark yourselves as being held under this covenant. This is a promise. If you do this, this marking of yourself will allow people to know who you are and who you belong to. Whether you say a word or not, you yourself are bringing your body into the subjection and the rule of what God has said. And so, anyone in verse 14, it says, any male who is not circumcised, anyone who does not do it is going to be cut off from the people. They're not covered under my covenant. They're not accepting the promise and wearing it. And in verse 14, it says, God said to Abraham, because he has changed his name, so he's no longer Abram, the way we've been calling him. He's the Abraham that we all know. And as for Sarai, your wife, you will not call her name Sarai, but you shall call her Sarah. And Sarah is the addition of some letters. So there is a change in both of their names. They have been added a letter. In the Hebrew alphabet, there is a particular symbol that goes along with it, and it is called Hey. But this symbol or this letter, and I'm saying symbol only because it is not an American English letter, it's a Hebrew letter. And what it does is it changes their name. But what it is that something's been added to their names. So before, her name meant princess. Afterwards, it still means princess. She is still treasured and she is still adored and all those things. She is still the same woman that has him lying about, being his wife versus his sister so that, people won't take her, because she's still in her 60s, 70s, and 80s. And these men are like, she's so beautiful. She's got to go see the king. He's got to see her. So she is still all of those things. But what changes is God added himself. The extra that they have is God himself. It's not that they did something, they earned something different. God himself said, I'm going to put a little more of my spirit on this person, on these people, this couple, this marriage, and what's coming from them. So that if I add myself to the mix when they have children, I'll be in the mix. It'll just be in their blood. And we see that when you look through the generations, that following Abram's obedience, there's a line where God has now marked the people that come from him, the nations, the generations that we're going to see in future chapters and in future books of the Bible, all have a little bit extra. They are God's specific owned people. So in verse 16, it says, and I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. God is aware that they have a child through Hagar. He is aware. He knows nothing is getting past God. But he's saying, I'm going to bless her and I'm going to give you a son with her. So before, when Abram got the promise, he was like, well, maybe I'm going to have to give it to a servant as an heir. And God was like, no, you're going to have a baby. It's going to be your son. And so him and Sarai come together. They bring Hagar into the mix, and Hagar is the mother of his son Ishmael. And he is like, so then God gives him another promise, and now God is clearing up now, saying it's not just your child, it's going to be your child with Sarah. And so he has given him, he's kind of solidified who this child was going to be, because what happened is God gave him an impossible promise, and he kept trying to make it make sense. Well, maybe there's a servant that I'm going to have because I can't have children. Instead of trusting and understanding and believing that God was going to do this very impossible thing, he tried to make it make sense. And God doesn't make sense according to our minds. Our brains are trapped right here. God is not existing only in this space. And it says that I'm going to bless her, and she'll be the mother of nations. So you're gonna be the father of nations. She's gonna be the mother of nations, and kings of people shall be of her. There's gonna be a royal line that comes from this child that you're gonna have. This is not just, oh, we're going to have a baby and it's cool and this baby's gonna grow up and do some great things, but there's descendants and there's royalty that comes from you. And again, Abram fell on his face. He always bows before God. He always worships first. And it says, and he laughs. He fell and was like, all right, God, you know how old I am. you know who I am. And he laughed. But he also laughed because he got the final piece of the puzzle. If you've ever been sitting and working on something that doesn't make any sense, and then suddenly the idea clicks in your head, and now it's like, oh my God, that's it. How did I look? And that's that excitement that he was moving with. So now it's not that I have to have another child. I have to have a servant. But me and my wife are going to get this thing. I've been waiting for this news. And he says, shall a child be born unto him who is 100 years old, and shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? Remember when the conversation started, he was 99. He understands that it takes time to have a baby. He gets the math on the pregnancy. And so he's like, I'm going to be 100 by the time this baby is born. And Sarah is 90. Clearly, we can't do this. And you're right. It's not in your own strength. And in verse 18, he says to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. I have a son, God. You're promising me another, but I have one. What about this one? And all he's doing is just mentioning his son to God because he's a good dad. He is a dad who has been there daily for his son. He loves him and he cares for him. Ishmael is not a castaway child. He loves and cares for him. And he says, what about my son? And God was like, no, Sarah's going to have a baby and all these things are going to happen. You're going to name him Isaac. And he is going to be proof of the covenant. He is going to be the one I'm going to establish this line through. He is that one. But God also promises in verse 20, and as for Ishmael, I heard you. I'm going to bless him too. And I'm going to make him fruitful, and I'm going to multiply him exceedingly. And he's going to have 12 princes. And he's going to be a great nation all his own. There is a blessing for Ishmael as well. Just because you're going to have a different family, just because there's going to be another son with the blessing of God on him, does not mean that I left him out. He didn't pick y'all. He didn't pick this situation. He didn't say, "Ooh, I really want to be born, God. Give me this group of people right here and let them be all mixed up in how I get onto earth." That's not what happened. And God said, because of your love for your son and because of my love for him, I'm going to bless him too. He going to have his own nation. You're going to be exceedingly blessed like this. Remember, I promised you descendants as numerous as the stars and the dust. I can do it through this one, but I can do it through these two as well. And so in verse 21, he promises that in a set time in the next year, she's going to give birth. There is going to be a point in time where she's going to give birth in this next year. I have already established it. A set time is like an appointment. This child is going to be born on this date and this time. I'm God. I know it. Whether she's pregnant today or not, here's his birthday. His name is Isaac. I'll meet you there. I'll see you when you reach that place that I'm telling you is coming. And that was the end of the conversation for them. And Abraham took Ishmael his son and all that were born in his house. So remember, the original rule was that you got to get circumcised. That's the proof. That's your commitment to the covenant. That's your side of the promise. It's a contract between them. And he circumcised everybody in the house. Absolutely all the people that work for him, his servants, the people that are in the house, the people that are in the field, his sons. Everybody gets circumcised. And it says he was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and Ishmael was 13 years old. So everybody had a bad day. and and so it says that, and when it finishes out in those remaining verses, it says that he brought everybody together to do it, and he did it. So everybody in the house was circumcised. So quick recap. God has a conversation with Abram, who is 99 years old. And in this conversation, he says, you're going to be a father to many nations. And it's not going to be 99 anymore. It's not going to be Abram anymore. It's going to be Abraham now. And in this point, I want you to know that there's a set time next year for your wife to bear a son. You're going to call him Isaac, and he's going to be an amazing legacy. He's going to be an amazing, there's going to be an amazing legacy and descendants that come through him. And the proof of that is that the appointment's already set. There's a set time. I know his birthday. That's going to happen. And I'm not going to forget about Ishmael. I'm not going to throw him away. He's not a castaway kid. He's not up. That's the practice baby. Toss him out. It's not that situation. No, he is going to be a father of nations as well. Princes are going to come through him. There's royalty in him. The same way there's royalty that's going to come through your wife, Sarah, there's royalty that's going to come through him. Here's the final piece of the blueprint. Now, here's your responsibility to it. You got to circumcise every male. Going forward at 8 days old, they'll be circumcised. But for everybody who wants to fall in line under this covenant right now, you have to be circumcised. And so Abram does that. And when God is talking to him, he says, you're not going to be Abram anymore. You're going to be Abraham, and your wife is not going to be Sarai anymore. She's going to be Sarah. And we're going to walk away with a blessing. Like I said, sometimes you are going to sow in pain. I'm so sure circumcision day for them was a painful time. But there is a promise and there's a covenant that's aligned with that. This marking here made them aware of who they were. It was consistent that they would know that they belonged to God. That God, our God, is their God, and that they are his people, and that they are bound to him through covenant relationship. So I want us to continue to carry this and know that God was comfortable putting a little bit of his spirit on Abram and Sarai to make him Abraham and Sarah, and they were fathers to many nations and mothers to many nations. God asked God for a little bit more of his spirit. Just tell me, hey, can I get a little bit more of your spirit on me so that I can be fruitful in the way that you told me to? Y'all have a fantastic day.